All right. Welcome, Quintin, to the JCS show. On this podcast, I'll talk with anyone, and my objective is to find out what are your values in the context of your story. And so you run an online Instagram account for a niche of training that I'm highly interested in. It's called nervous system training. That's how I found you originally. Um, and there's not a lot of people doing it online. I think it's really valuable information. I've used it with some of my clients. I'm a trainer as well. Um, and so that's how I found you. That's in following your account. I can say honestly that no one else in that niche is sharing the quality of information you are. So I appreciate what you're doing. And I reached out to you just to dive a little bit deeper. So that's how this call came to be. But anyways, thank you for joining, Quintin. I'm excited to dive in today.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Appreciate the compliment. I hope my content is giving people a lot of value. That's the main goal.
Yeah, there's a lot of really useful information, and especially I'm pretty critical when it comes to the content that I'm seeing, especially in the fitness world, athletics world. That is something I want to talk to you about later, the differentiation between athletics and fitness. But anyways, yeah, it's through my abilities to vet. It's high quality information, and it's concise. It's well written. So anyways, if anyone's watching, definitely go check it out. I'll have links to all your social media accounts in the description of this video everywhere it's posted. So yeah, let's dive in a little bit. Tell me a little bit about your background before nervous system training, or just as an athlete, as a trainer. How did you end up in this career path?
Sure. Okay. So this all started. Well, I mean, I got like. Okay, I'll give you like the shorter version. This is a long ass story. This goes all the way back to my dad doing jujitsu in the '80s in
Wow.
California before the Gracies like had like a well established gym. They were doing seminars at El Camino College. So my dad's always been like hip to the game before it was even cool, before UFC and all that. And they lived in California. I was born in California. I was born in Redondo Beach. So I've always known there about like martial arts, jujitsu, UFC, even since like 1991. I was like learning triangle chokes and stuff like that from my dad. And then so it's always kind of been a part of me. It's always kind of been a part of like my family culture, like martial arts. And so naturally, after high school, I wanted to get into MMA. It was real popular, it was real cool. I had a buddy in high school that started doing it. I didn't really like going to college. I only like to focus on things that really engage me. And there's a lot of things you got to do in college that's just not engaging. So I just couldn't stick with it. Was going to join the Marines. Uh, Backed out of that because I didn't want to end up like some of my buddies who were going to the Middle East. That was a weird time. And so I got into MMA instead. I decided I wanted to be a cage fighter. And I kind of got into sports really late in life. I didn't start playing sports, like really competitive sports, like my junior year of high school. So, I was, and that's when I discovered working out. I discovered weightlifting. I discovered speed and agility training, all these things. And by the time I was really starting to become a good competitive athlete, like I already was graduating high school. Like I was already over, and I always had like this unfulfilled athletic desire. So I just started looking for a place to push that outlet. And yeah, so I was a huge MMA fan right out of high school, graduate high school 2011. Obsessed with MMA. Wanted to train it, learn all about it, skip classes just to watch UFC fights on the old UFC website, back in like 2009, back when Randy Couture was fighting Brock Lesnar. Those were some good days.
Yeah, that's
And
awesome.
yeah, and then as time went on, got into training, got into MMA. Trained at Gladiator MMA, a small little gym in Brighton, Michigan. Kept working at it. Kept trying to get better, learning the skills, and the sport was so young at the time. We were all like, most people didn't know how to do proper triangle chokes in the gym. We were just trying to like teach each other stuff. And then summer around 2011, BJ Penn was getting ready for a fight with Diego Sanchez. And BJ Penn just had a fight with Kenny Florian and totally kicked Kenny Florian's ass. And BJ looked great. Like I was a decent BJ Penn fan. Like I was, he was really cool. I always played BJ in UFC 2008. The video game on Xbox 360. at the time. Yeah, and then BJ was just looking phenomenal. He just came off a loss against George St. Pierre, his second loss. You know, he basically got out cardioed. You know, in GSP, he was the man. So BJ went back to lightweight, and from that, he decided to make some serious changes. And BJ fought Kenny Florian, looked awesome, had abs, was moving fast, not getting tired. You know, BJ's always been dangerous, but now he seemed like athletically dangerous. So I was like, okay, you know, BJ's turning around. He must be doing more kettlebells or something. Then I see a UFC countdown for BJ against Diego, and BJ Penn's doing this crazy training methodology that I've never seen before. You know, he's like on slant boards and he's like throwing balls, doing hand-eye coordination stuff. He's throwing this like red machine with like a padded arm, doing stuff with disc and these black PVC pipes. Just the weirdest training methodology. And I was like, dang, man, like whatever he's doing, like I gotta get some of that in my life. You know, and I just had my first fight at the time. You know, I ended up not winning. You know, it was a good fight, but it was like it was tough. You know, like I'd never been in a fight, only sparring and stuff like that. I'd never even been in a street fight, so that first cage fight was really jarring for me. I got kicked in the face right off the bat, totally shattered my nose, and I was like, yeah, didn't end up winning. And it was my first fight, and the guy was like 5-2. So it wasn't. You don't get the best matchups in those early days in amateur MMA. And so I was like, you know what? I got to get stronger. I got to get faster. I got to get better cardio. Do not want to get beat up again. So I was like, okay, whatever BJ's doing, you know, that the Diego Sanchez fight happened against BJ, and BJ looked phenomenal. He was fast, he was sharp, he was explosive, he wasn't getting tired. And Diego got totally dismantled in that fight. And Diego was dangerous. He was a dangerous guy back then when Diego dropped to lightweight. You know, he was like known for his cardio, known for his aggression. And BJ literally like sliced him apart. Like he had the biggest cut over his forehead that I've ever. They had to stop the fight because Diego's skull was exposed because the gash was so large. It was brutal. I remember like for days I was like, oh my god, like that was the worst beating I've ever seen a man take. And I was like, dang man, I got to get this training in my body. So somewhere around 2011, I really dedicated myself to strength and conditioning because I saw if it worked for BJ, it should work for me. And I wanted to make a career change. So I was thinking, like, you know what, that training that BJ's doing, like, I need to get a hold of the advanced stuff. So I'm going to become a personal trainer. I'm going to get my certification through National Academy of Sports Medicine. And that training's going to be in there. Like, it's going to be in the textbooks, you know, the advanced stuff. So got my certification. Took me a while. I was not really good. It's not a great. I didn't have great study habit skills. You know, it took me 3 times to pass my NASM. You know, I was a horrible test taker, and I eventually figured out a way to learn. You know, that really worked for me. I was never good in school, by the way. Never had good grades, even though I tried really hard. Never had good grades. So I eventually passed. Tried to become a trainer, and I'm sure as other trainers who are listening to this podcast, you realize that okay, you're great, you know movements, you know weight loss, you know macros, but you can't sell anything. So you're gonna struggle. And I would say like 60 to 90% of all people who become trainers quit after the first 6 months because they can't drum up business. They don't know how to talk to people, they don't know how to generate leads, they don't know how to close. It's hard. You know, it's a hard ass job. And I personally think that the certification world for trainers, ACE, NASM, CSCS, those are all great certifications. You learn a lot, but a lot of the times I feel like they're really for insurance purposes in fitness facilities. You know, like I really wish there was more information on how to develop a training business, which honestly feels like 80% of the work as a trainer. Training people is the easy part, but drumming up business and keeping it sustainable so you're not working a part-time job door dashing, that's really hard. So I've kind of fell down that path of being a trainer, looking for information. You kind of get caught up in trying to just make a living with that I almost forgot all about the nervous system training. That was the main reason why I wanted to get my certification. You know, you kind of just fall into the tradition of battle ropes and kettlebells and you know, and steel maces and stuff like that, just the fitness stuff. you kind of get wrapped back into that. CrossFit was really big at the time. So I was getting into CrossFit, and I just kind of lost sight of that. And it wasn't until like 2015, Nick Kirsten was on the Joe Rogan Experience. I think it was episode 650 or 654, somewhere around there. You find it on Spotify. And Nick Kirsten, Joe Rogan introduced him. He's like, hey, I understand you've been training Rafael dos Anjos. Dos Anjos just beat Anthony Pettis, for the lightweight belt. And Dos Anjos has been looking phenomenal. It's like, and I understand you've been utilizing the Marinovich training system. And I was like that's like, oh yeah, like that's that training system that like it all came back like a flashback. It's like MK Ultra, like that word Marinovich like activated, like it was like shit, I forgot all about that stuff. And Nick Kirsten started going in on the training system, what he's been doing with RDA. Now at the time, Rafael dos Anjos was looking phenomenal. Still a great fighter to this day. Of course, he's getting older. Things fall apart when you get older. Even I'm experiencing that now. But at the time, back in 2015, RDA was always like decent. He was like good. He was a good fighter, like 15, top 15, top 10 in the world. He's a good fighter. But he started becoming great fast. And I remember after that Anthony Pettis fight, he just beat Anthony Pettis' ass. Like just kicked his ass in every facet up against the cage, his striking, takedowns. And Anthony Pettis was the man. Like Anthony Pettis is a bad motherfucker. Like he was kicking guys off the cage wall, like doing Mortal Kombat shit, and for a decent fighter, for a good fighter to take Anthony Pettis apart, I was like, dude, this Brazil. I remember talking about it with my buddy Cody in the car after we leave Buffalo Wild Wings. It's like, this Brazilian is on juice, man. There's no way you get this good. Like, this guy is taking shit. Like, you just get this good this fast? Like, nothing gets you that good that fast. Like we have our certifications from the National Academy of Sports Medicine. There's nothing in there that helps us. You know what I mean? So we were convinced, listening to the podcast, Nick Kirsten started breaking down way more in-depth training philosophy, hyperactivation of the feet, balance sports, utilizing the PVC pipe, plyometric training, Soviet Union periodization, the process in which Marv Marinovich was hired by the NFL to literally travel the nation and to figure out what makes a good athlete. He had this very unique situation. He invented the NFL Combine. So there's all these things like I was starting to learn about and realize like, okay, there's a whole different world of training methodology that most people don't even know about. There is such a thing as secret sauce. And so after I learned, I was like, and I was coming off of another loss. My second fight, I got knocked out by this guy who's a badass. I can't remember his name. But he knocked my ass out because I just wasn't training properly. I was doing a lot of inappropriate training methodologies to try to get ready for this fight, and I was feeling weaker. Didn't know how to wake up properly, and I lost. It was super embarrassing loss. So I really wanted to get better. And after that podcast, I emailed Nick Kirsten like that day, and I was like, listen, like I don't care like what it takes. Like I need to learn this training system. Like I'll fucking live at your house. I'll stay at a hostel. I'll pay you whatever you want. I need to learn this training system. And he's like, don't worry about it. Holding the certification process, guys who want to learn this, it's in 2 months. It's like, just make it out to California. It's like, here's what it's going to cost, and I'll get you certified. I'm like, I'll be there. Saved up all my money. I even borrowed money from my parents, to make this happen. I was like, you got to get me to California. I got to learn this. And flew out to California, flew out to Hermosa Beach. I think his gym was located in Torrance at the time, right near where I was born, right near my old neighborhood when I grew up when I was a kid. So it's kind of weird, kind of going back there. I'm like, oh, this is where it all started. This is where BJJ really took off, in that Torrance Redondo area. And did Nick Kirsten's 2-day seminar, learned the athletic assessment process, learns the fundamentals of like the ball work training, the balance training, how to identify weaknesses in the kinetic chain, and started learning about how the supercat works, how the ISO accelerator works, utilizing the glute ham, all these things that are just now they're pretty like normal to me now, but at the time this was like a whole new world, whole new paradigm shifting of training. And
Can you just explain real quick what are those pieces of equipment? The Super
yeah,
Cat?
okay. So like the glute ham, most people know what a glute ham is,
Yeah.
but like the Super Cat,
PhD.
yeah, like the Super Cat is this arm that utilizes like a 3-to-1 chain crank system, and it has this lever that can swing up and down, and it's attached to this carriage that loads it. And because the outside chains are smaller than the chain on the inside, the like gears on a bike, uh, uh, the leverage of the eccentric force is always heavier than the leverage of the concentric force. So it's always eccentric dominant. It's phenomenal for plyometric training, isometric. You can do everything on the SuperCat. If you ever get a hold of a SuperCat, buy it. That will change
Yeah.
your life. You'll never need another strength machine ever. Swear to God, ever. That machine does it all. I don't know how they went out of business. They really got to figure out their marketing. ISO accelerator uses centrifugal force generation using fan resistance, kind of like a Concept 2 row machine. Those are hard to get a hold of. I cannot get a hold of an ISO accelerator. I actually have a hydro centrifugal force accelerator, which has a similar concept. It's a pretty good machine. I'm pretty happy with it. But all these different machines, that move away from traditional weightlifting, traditional barbell loading training techniques. Now it's still weight training, it's still loading, but they're just different tools. They're tools that have more versatility. You can do a lot more with it that are more sport specific for the athlete. And but yeah, got my certification. It was actually a tough certification process. We actually had to train athletes for a period of time, run them through the assessment, and get them improvements and document it and
That's cool.
send it to them before we even allowed to be certified. So, Nick Kirsten, he had a philosophy: you keep what you kill. You prove that you can do it. You prove you can create development. Then I'll let you be certified. Took me about like 8 to 10 weeks. Found two guys, actually two trainers from Mercy Elite Sports Performance. These two guys, Dan and Steve. I owe lots of them. They actually volunteered their time to have me train them for a couple weeks to show marks of improvement. Got my certification, and it's just been my life's work ever since. And I got certified in late 2015, and that's just been like what I've been doing since.
Cool. And so just to sum up the details real quick. So you get into training, you have your first fight, you can do better. You see BJ Penn have his fight, much improved from previous fights, and you're like, what is he doing differently? You learn about the Marinovich brothers, and then follow the certification process from there. Can you dive in a little bit on the background of Marv Marinovich? You kind of covered it a little bit in that, but I'm just curious, like, where did he get the techniques from? Like, did
Right.
he come up with it all himself, or was there a similar system that he adopted and modified for his own
Yeah.
purposes?
So just to create like a context, is that everything is borrowed,
Yeah.
abstracted, and blended together. So nothing is truly original. That's why a lot of people say, like, I only say that because the level of haters and criticizers that I get on my social media from other trainers, surprisingly, who, whatever. But so he's not like an inventor of a system. He follows the Bruce Lee principle. You take the things that work best and you make it together to try to come up with the best outcome. So Marv Marinovich, great freaking athlete, legendary football player. Played for USC, California. I think he was the first. I think he was the first football player to get drafted by the AFL and the NFL. And he was known as like this phenom. Like there's like rumors that guys had to get their helmets cut off their head because of how hard he hit them. Their helmets like crushed around their head. Who knows if it's true, but it's really fun lore. About
Hmm.
like Marv Marinovich. And he was just this phenomenal football player. He was just this amazing competitor. And he got into the NFL and in the AFL and was struggling to get playing time. And so he really dedicated himself to getting stronger and bigger, and he was squatting like hundreds of pounds in the weight room, bench pressing hundreds of pounds, deadlifting hundreds of pounds trying to outcompete some of these other bigger guys that were on the line. Because I think he was a guard or a D tackle or something along those lines, or a defensive end. He was a lineman. And I might misquote some of these things, so I don't have all these details memorized. But I think out of like a 2 to 3 year career in the NFL, it only amounted to one play on the field.
Wow.
And I think he suffered from injuries, or he wasn't able to make numbers. Maybe he was cut. I don't exactly know the details, but his professional career he didn't live up to the potential that he thought it could be, and he hung up his athletic career early, and he dedicated his life to figure out what went wrong. Like, how come I did not have the success in the pros that I did in college? How come I didn't become, this great professional football player when everyone predicted that I would be? And so he dedicated his time and analyzed things. He's a very analytical, type A kind of guy. And he analyzed, like, well, what were the biggest changes between my college career and my pro career? Like, what was different? And he kind of concluded that the strength and conditioning protocols that he really overemphasized in was a big difference between the two careers. And so he's like, okay, maybe there's something about what I was doing with my weightlifting that really deteriorated my athletic abilities. And so he started to really break down like the ideas of weightlifting, studying what other guys were doing, the effects of weightlifting. And I don't know the details of this. I think there's a documentary that kind of explains it, but a coach for the Raiders decided that he wanted to come up with his own protocol and process to getting new football players in the door. I don't remember the coach. If you go on Gary's Instagram, there's actually a small clip of them sort of explaining this. Gary Marinovich, he's still alive. So, I don't know why the balloon showed up, sorry. But Gary Marinovich, reposted that. And so the Raiders head coach, I wish I knew his name, he hired Marv Marinovich to go out and come up with the best athletes you can. Go out to every college will pay you to scout out all these different athletes, find the best guys, and also determine who could be the best guys so we know where to make quality picks in the draft. And so Marv Marinovich was given this perfect situation where he had funding, he had a process, and he had time to figure out what makes the best athletes, which guys have the best numbers on the field, and why. And so he became the first strength and conditioning coach for the NFL. This was like, I think, late 60s, early 70s. This was before like strength and conditioning was really studied and researched. Everything was invested towards cardiovascular fitness and fitness training, not sports performance training. There was actually very little methodology and funding being put into that in the West. So he needed more ideas on how to measure these athletes. And so the only resources he can find on really in-depth measurements on athletic abilities was through this guy named Dr. Yessis from UCLA. I think UCLA. Now, Dr. Yessis was able to travel to Russia during the Cold War because his parents are actually Russian. He had Russian lineage. And through some sort of political loophole, I can't remember what, but they were allowed to share information with Dr. Yuri Forshahansky of the Soviet Union, who was the head of research and development in sports performance science for the USSR. And so Dr. Yestis would travel back and forth and study the sports performance training breakthroughs that the Soviet Union was coming up with, because the Soviet Union was using athletics as a huge propaganda tool to prove that communist nation was superior than democratic capitalist nations. Because in capitalist nations, things only progress and evolve through funding. But it's capitalism. You have to get people to buy into it. You have to crowdfund money in order to grow an industry. In a communist nation, literally Joseph Stalin or Nikita Khrushchev said, I want this done at this date. And the whole nation would rally behind that because of one man's decision. In the United States, get the fuck out of here. No one's going to do that. People have freedom of choice. They'll only do it if they're interested in doing it, if they can pursue it. if they want to pursue it. So in Russia and the Soviet Union, they had unlimited bodies, unlimited resources, unlimited scientists to come up with how do we develop the best athletes possible. And so that's where they invented plyometrics, periodization, cardiovascular training, all the things that are staples in sports performance. It was all developed from the Soviet Union. Dr. Yesis learned a lot of this, and Marv Marinovich learned it from Dr. Yesis and started taking the Soviet Union principles, the sports science principles, and he started to incorporate that, and he started mixing in physical therapy principles that the West was coming up with. The Western nations were huge in the physical therapy department because they had medical funding. That's why physical therapy is a licensed practitioner. You can get a PhD in physical therapy. You can't get a PhD in fitness though, because it's not viewed as the same thing. There's no medical funding, there's no medical research behind it. So he took measurements of physical therapy, techniques of physical therapy, and started blending that in with the strength and conditioning protocols and philosophies of the Soviet Union. And also through experimentation of his son, Todd Marinovich, he started developing this nervous system training methodology. And that's basically how it showed up.
Why is it called nervous system training? Like, how does that emphasize nervous system in ways that traditional training methods don't?
Because well, for one, it helps create a terminology for people to understand. Because we need a language to understand a context. As human beings.
Right.
That's why, like, you'll see that a lot. In like everyday life, where like for example, the word orange. Like a fruit is orange and the color is orange, but they both mean the same thing, right? Even though they're not. So that's just a way for our brains to understand a context. So he came up with nervous system training the same way we came up with plyometrics. Well, let me ask you a question. Like, where do you think the word plyometrics came from?
I don't know. I'm trying to think of the roots. Plyo is that movement based, right?
Yeah. So
Um,
I'll tell you, it literally was just kind of made up by a track and field coach with Dr. Yesis. A lot of these terms are just made up for us. There's not like,
mhm.
like dinosaur just means, I think it means like great terror in Latin. Like like terminology, like I get some people say like, well, everything is nervous system. Like, yeah, I know, but we're just calling it that so you understand what we're talking about when we try to teach it to you. It's called nervous system training for that very reason, because it does overemphasize principles to strengthen the central nervous system more than just focus on the muscular system. So, and it's a way to separate it a little bit, because everything helps the nervous system. Like even training things in fitness, or going on the elliptical, you are working the nervous system. But the training principles overemphasizes on strengthening and enhancing the central nervous system. So that's why it's kind of coined that term. So it is kind of made up. Not to say that this isn't nervous system training, only this is nervous. It's just a way to kind of help with the branding, the marketing, and to translate why the philosophies are a little different.
Can you just paint a picture of it? Like what types of exercises emphasize the nervous system? I mean, obviously you're saying all
Mhm.
exercises engage the nervous system, but which types of exercises are where the nervous system is the focus? Like, what does that look like? Just like in
Yeah.
an individual exercise level.
Yeah. So the primary the main philosophy that differentiates this training system than all the other training systems is the redevelopment of the feet. Is the most
Interesting.
underlooked area in all of fitness and sports performance Western philosophy is foot training, hyper training of the foot. Like your foot is the strongest limb on the whole human body, and no one thinks about it, no one sees it, no one overemphasizes on it. So like for example, with just one of your feet, you can lift up your whole body weight in like 1 second. Like you stand on one foot and push to your toe, like you can lift your whole body weight up, no problem. It's not even that hard. Like your foot is such a strong lever, and we are so undertrained in the feet. So the idea that and your feet are also the main hot points of your central nervous system. They process information on the ground to tell your body where you are in like 3D space. You know, like it's where your proprioceptive processes lie. It's where your fast twitch mechanisms are in. You know, like the classic example. You know, say like you're you know you're doing a sport and you lose your balance. You know, to catch your balance, like your feet are gonna like jump out in different areas to try to catch yourself involuntarily. So there's autonomous mechanisms built into the nervous system that we can hijack and hyper stimulate to enhance sports performance movements. So that's the primary differentiating factor between nervous system training, the Marinovich training system, and traditional sports performance philosophies is the hyper training and strengthening and redevelopment of the foot and ankle complex.
This is as a kind of adjacent topic real quick. What shoes do you wear for training? Since I'm very particular about my shoes, I wear Vivo Barefoots. I have a couple other barefoot brands, but Vivo Barefoot's my favorite. But are you? I've seen some of your videos, so I kind of have an idea. But
Yeah, so I mean, I've tried a bunch of different shoes. Like Mark Sisson, you know, shout out to Mark. He sent me a pair of his oh man, what do they call them? I'm forgetting off the top of my head. He has his new branded toe shoes everyone should check out. They're really good. I like them. He sent me these toe shoes that are pretty cool. I wear those every once in a while. I'll go run around in them or something like that. I've worn Vibrams before. Vibrams make a good shoe. It's kind of funny. I will say this: Vibrams have outlasted all of my Nike shoes. I don't know what it is about Nike, but those goddamn shoes just always rip apart on me. Nike, figure that out, man. You guys got to make a good, strong shoe.
I think it's
I do
planned
like
obsolescence. But
yeah, I do like Nike because their soles are usually minimalist, but lately their soles have been kind of ridiculous. I've been not really feeling their vibe on their shoes lately. What's another one? That's about it. Like when I just walk around, when I'm just casually, like I'll wear like a pair of Nikes, you know, a pair of Air Force Ones or a pair of Pumas. You know, after it does hurt my feet after a while, but when I'm training, usually when I'm training, I'm barefoot, almost always.
yeah,
Yeah.
that's kind of unique to the martial arts world. But that's as soon as I start training, and just to color in a little bit of my own story, since there's some parallels with yours. I played sports from a young age, but I had a lot of injuries. I tore my ACL when I was 10, and then I had
What?
a yeah, it
When you
was
were 10, ACL tear?
yeah, and then I had a surgery, but I was always kind of like behind the sticks, I was trying to catch up, and I always played sports, but um, before that ACL, when I was really young, I was always one of the best on every team, and then after that, I was trying to keep up rather than trying to get out ahead. So I kind of ended up after high school the same kind of thing. I was like, oh, I always wanted to access more of my personal athletic potential, and I think that's what's kind of led me down this path. Whereas you were a little different; you kind of got into it late, and then realized it was something that was a natural fit for you. And but it was the same
Yeah.
sort of like, and same with Marv Marinovich. It sounds like it's that sort of like there's a little bit more that I could have squeezed out if I just knew where to allocate my focus. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, so cool. And another thing that I wanted to ask you about is, and you've brought it up a couple times, but differentiate fitness from athletics, since that's something I've seen in your content. You mentioned this conversation, but I think that's an interesting idea. So
Sure.
when you're saying fitness and you're saying athletics, those two terms, what do they mean to you, and where's the gap between them?
Okay, so this goes way back. I'll try. I apologize. Some of my explanations are so drawn out, but there's a because I'm very fascinated with the origins of things because that helps us understand why we arrived where we arrived in society and as a culture. So this
Yeah,
goes
I'm all about
all
the
the way
context.
back.
So
Yeah, this goes all the way back during. I have it highlighted in my book, and I don't want to pull my book out and search it up and waste airtime. But this goes back somewhere in the 1940s, 1950s, basically after World War II. There was a huge deficit in the process and development of grain and food in the world. You know, because most of the agricultural lands in Europe were destroyed, or the amount of male workers and laborers was totally decimated throughout most of the world, like especially on the male side. You know, people on both genders die for sure, but the amount of human males died in World War II was astronomical, especially in Russia, especially in France, especially in Great Britain, especially in Germany. A lot of dead men in Germany. So there was a huge gap, and the United States really tried to fill that gap with the process of refined grains and carbohydrates. Now, with that, the only reason why I bring this up is because there's a side effect to high grain carbohydrate diets. It's hypotension, cardiovascular disease. Those things started to show up more and more in the population. But at the same time, we just came through a Great Depression and a World War, and our US politicians were determined to never create a situation where the people in the United States will starve. So, with the huge influx of agricultural production in the United States during the 1940s, 1950s, you know, there's some pros and cons. You have plenty of food, but also you start developing heart attacks, start developing heart disease. You know, so we needed a solution to try to help with that. And we really doubled down on resources to cardiovascular fitness and health. You know, and this goes all the way back from like, I think the Finns figured this out with like the Cooper's test, or it's the Swedes, I can't remember. Somewhere in Scandinavia, they came up with like the Cooper's test, you know, learning that cardiovascular training was very beneficial, you know, the heart healthy approach towards lifestyle. Of course, that gets altered and manipulated through scientists during the 60s and 70s with the whole, you know, periodic, the table, not periodic table elements, but the food pyramid, you know, and they started really influxing grain and carbohydrates in American diets to sell and to make more money through this food processing monopoly that the United States had. And so we needed more and more cardiovascular and fitness. And so that really developed a lot of resources because the demands, you know, supply and demand. The amount of people dying of heart disease was going through the roof. Like I remember when I was a kid in the 90s, every man was dying of a heart attack. Like it was so common. So, because of the influx of hypotension, obesity, and heart disease, the medical industry really started to put a lot of resource into research and development of cardiovascular fitness. And then all of a sudden, the population of Western cultures needed an answer to try to keep themselves healthier because people are dying, you know, left and right of heart disease. And so, supply and demand in a capitalist nation. This is where ideas of fitness really started to take off. Plus, bodybuilding started to really launch off into the United States. You know, with Arnold Schwarzenegger, Sylvester Stallone in the '80s, really pushing the Hollywood lifestyle and body, you know, muscular physique, and so it sold. So that's what evolved. That's what really got the money. And so what happened was the fitness industry was evolving and getting all this supply and demand, and this industry was thriving and growing, but the sports performance world wasn't really growing at the same rate. So a lot of the research, philosophy, and development and tools that sports performance trainers were getting from the fitness world and pulling it in. Now, parallel to, say, the Soviet Union, they could give a shit less what the quality of life is for the health of their people. I mean, it's a communist nation. Like what, you know, like they literally had a chain of gulags, you know, all across Russia where they would just have slave labor camps just because you didn't, because you were suspected of thinking against like the Soviet Union a certain way. Like that's a whole nother thing to dive into. But they wanted good, strong, fast athletes, you know, at any cost. Doesn't matter if it costs them their health. Make it happen. Get this hockey team better. Get these gymnasts better. Get them running faster. Get them jumping higher. I don't care how many athletes, you know, break their knees in the process. Find a way to get it done. So they got it done. They didn't need any supply and demand. They just had orders, and you fucking followed orders back in those days. Back in 1960s Russia, you followed orders because you do not want the NKVD showing up at your door in the middle of the night, arresting you and your family and sending you to a labor camp. So that was a big difference maker. That's why I think there's a huge distinction between fitness and sports performance. And what's going on right now is that most of the sports performance philosophies and tools that they use today are all borrowed and captured from this fitness industry that exploded between 1960 and 1990. And so I have a great analogy that I try to tell people, get them to think about. Like, if you look at like the most sophisticated sports performance facility in the United States today, you're going to find what? Kettlebells, dumbbells, barbells, right? How
Cable
old is
machines.
the Yeah, okay, so we got some machines, something a little new, It hasn't really evolved that much since like the 1980s, 1970s, when Nautilus came out with their cable machines. But like, how old is the kettlebell? How old is the barbell? How old is the Olympic bar?
I've seen, I read something that the kettlebell's been around since at least the Greeks. There's some evidence they had stone ones. I think the barbell was early 1900s, right? It was.
Yeah, it's like
I
it's
read
like
some.
80 to
Yeah,
100 years old. Like,
yeah,
why aren't these tools evolving? Like, everything in our society is evolving. Our computers, our weapons. Like, would you ever go to war with a musket?
yeah. No,
No, you take a freaking modern weapon. Like, why aren't these tools evolving? We're just okay with just it's like Warhammer 40K. We're just sticking with technology. Generate. I don't know if you ever played it before, but they have this idea that it's heresy to innovate. So it's just, if there's any nerds out there, you'll get the joke. But there's no innovation to the tools. Now you'll see some innovation here and there, like Wet Methods trying to innovate things with certain tools using like his Wet Club. I think it's a pretty interesting idea. You see some innovations with like the Bowflex and things like that. But generally speaking, in the sports performance world, it's still Olympic bars, kettlebells, TRXs, battle ropes. It's like the same stuff over and over and over again. It's not really evolving, right? And so I raised the question, why? Why isn't the science evolving in these Western nations? You know, so we have two choices. We
hmm
can You go with your next question, or I can dive into that.
yeah. Let's. I'm curious. What do you think the
Okay,
reason is?
so I think the reason is money. It's capitalism. It always comes down to the bottom line in this country, which it should, by the way. I don't think that's wrong. I'm not like a communist apologist. It's like I think communism is fucking horrible. Like, it's a really bad system. Millions of people died from that system. Any extreme political governmental system is detrimental, any right or left, right? Okay, so now that's established. But capitalism needs money to grow. If you don't have money, it's not going anywhere. So this is a big paradigm shifter for me. Where I was training with this physical therapist back in during COVID. She was a national hockey player, played for a University of Michigan, and she was an MD in physical therapy. She owned her own clinic, physical therapy, and she was telling me that she was a part of the first University of Michigan study to prove that off ice training improved on ice performance in hockey. And I'm like off ice training, like skater jumps and med ball and all that stuff. She's like, yeah. And I'm like, when did this happen? She's like 2007, like the year I graduated. Helped me. I think with her PhD or her doc. I can't remember. I never went to college, so I don't know how that system works. But I was like, wait a minute. You're telling me it took the University of fucking Michigan all the way to 2007 to come up with a study that off ice training improves on ice training? She's like, yeah. I'm like, why? Like, no shit. Like, I could have told you that. Like, could have told you that back in the 90s. The Russians could have told you that back in the 60s. Like, that's been proven years ago. Like, like, why did it take so long? She's like, well, you gotta find athletes. These athletes are expensive. Like, these are U of M hockey players. U of M is not a cheap school. It's a very prestigious university. So now you got to find athletes that want to volunteer for this. And those athletes require food. They require training hours. They got to get through their life too. Then you got to have a control group. You got to have a test group. You got to have people to conduct the studies. You have people to publish it. You have people to peer review it. You got all these different people, and they all require money to make this study happen. So it's really difficult. Like, it can cost up to $500,000 to conduct a university study like this. Like, how many studies can you conduct a year? Like, who's got like you got a couple $1 million to throw around for something that may not even help their athletes who are on a $60,000 to $120,000 scholarship. It's like, no, it's like
Yeah.
studies come really slow. Studies come really slow in this place, in the United States. And so I was like, geez, I was like, okay, that explains a lot. That explains why the innovation to sports performance science in the West is not really making a lot of ground. Like, we're still doing the same shit we did in the 90s and 80s that we're doing today. Now it's slightly evolved, but most of the breakthroughs are not coming from the universities. Most of the breakthroughs are coming from these third-party guys, like Knees Over Toes. He's coming up with his own anecdotal studies and his own research and sending it out to the world. Most guys like third party, I call them third party researchers, are usually making the breakthroughs when it comes to fitness and sports performance science in this country right now. It's not the universities. Unfortunately, it should be, but it's not. They just can't produce it. Or my own person, there's always human factors to it. Maybe they don't want to produce more. Like, if I had a sports performance job, at a prestigious university, and I'm making $500,000 with my textbooks and my research, why would I jeopardize all that? Why would I want to go against all the research and development that I put together and realize, oh shit, I made a total mistake because I didn't take these athletes' shoes off.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not saying that's fact, but you got to take all these different variables and we start like piecing them together. It starts making a lot of sense.
Yeah, it's interesting, and I appreciate you kind of diving deep into the context. Like, the question on this show is, what are your values in the context of your story? And so I appreciate that you're diving deep, and as I'm understanding your training systems and how you've developed as a coach, a trainer over the years, it's pretty clear that you're looking back at, like, what is this actually? If I'm looking at information, like, where is it coming from? What's the ideology behind it? Where does that fit into the course of history? And those are the types of variables that you're weighing when you're deciding
Mm-hmm.
what's going to be important to you, what's going to be something that you incorporate into your systems. So yeah, let's to bring it back a little bit.
Sure.
What are you doing now? So do you have a gym? Are you training in person? I know your Instagram has been doing very well lately. So like, what is a week in the life of Quintin look like these days as a trainer?
Well, so about a month and a half ago, I stopped training people in person to dedicate full time into like the online training. Because like, one, it was growing so much faster. I was running out of time and energy to work two businesses simultaneously. And I kind of have like, my big picture goal is, as much as I love training athletes, like I've trained a lot of youth athletes, mostly high school kids, college kids, accomplished a lot in my little facility in Howell, Michigan. But there was a ceiling to it. There was only so many people I could help. There's only so much impact I could make. My big picture goal is, I want this training to become mainstream. I want this to become like the standard, training philosophy that all athletes could have access to and start utilizing. Because that's going to make huge impact. Like, I don't know, like, I couldn't tell you how many times I've worked with kids that were pretty decent, maybe just a little above average, and we made them phenomenal and got them like scholarships to Central or Notre Dame, or something like that, and totally altered their future and the potential future of their family name forever. That's huge impact for one life. So if I can make this impact on a international scale, I figured this social media platform is the best way to do it. It's a good start. It's a good launching pad, but I need more hours to dedicate towards it. And the more in my online training business, the more clients that I get, the more time I need to help them. People are in the system because, like I like to work very carefully with my clients, my online training business. I'm not one that's really big on just sending out PDFs on programs and charging a huge amount of money. Like, I want to make sure people get results, people learn the system. And when they're done working with me, they can take this system and they can utilize it in their life and have more appropriate training methodologies to become better. So yeah. And, it's hard. The online training business, like it started as a side hustle, and then it just started to go viral. Because there's not a lot of information out there, and I knew there's a gap because Marv Ranovich was very secretive with his training methodology. Other guys in the space, they are very like coveted with the training system, and I personally think that's a little bit of a mistake. Like for example, if you go on Instagram, I bet you I could find 50 sports performance coaches, and they're showing all their training techniques, all their methodologies, right? But they're all having great careers, nice facilities, working with plenty of athletes. Like that doesn't take away business from anyone, because people don't. You're not gonna run into a bunch of athletes and from watching your Instagram videos or some of your secret methodology. Like it's not what people are paying for. People are paying for your help. Like no one can self-coach. Like I barely self-coach myself, and I fail all the time. Like it's really hard. That's why I started the vlog series. So my viewers are kind of like that second layer of accountability to get my shit done, and to do it right. It's so hard to self-coach yourself. So these athletes are going to come to you for that help. They don't want to do it themselves. They want to be guided through it. It's so much easier for them. So I think that's been a big fear with these other nervous system trainers. I think they're worried about competition. I think they're worried that other trainers are going to see this training methodology, duplicate it, take it for themselves, and become a competitor. But I think that's absolutely ridiculous because I think there's only like 13 guys in the United States that know how to do this training method. Maybe 8 or 6 of them do it full time, like it's their only way of eating.
Do you know
How
what
many?
the can you name them? Just out of curiosity,
Okay, yeah. So
just
there's
like the
Speed of
top few.
Sport. Yeah, there's Speed of Sport with Nick Kirsten. There's Brian McGinty with Power Plus. And before I name this, I'm not naming names to say these guys are doing anything wrong. I'm just literally stating what's happening or what I
Hmm.
think is happening. I think every single one of these guys, phenomenal trainers, and a lot of these guys have totally changed my lives. So full disclaimer, I'm not saying any of them are doing anything wrong. I just have a difference in perspective on how I approach sharing information with the world. Okay, now let's establish. So there's Nick Kirsten at Speed of Sport. He's my mentor. He taught me everything. Great guy. There's Brian McGinty at Power Plus. He's also helped me out a lot too. I've had a lot of good phone calls with Brian. I would not be here without his help. He totally helped me restructure my training protocol, my business methodology. I owe that guy a lot. He's a great guy. He's always been very helpful with me. There's oh my god, I can't believe methods of training. God, I can't believe I'm forgetting his name. Really nice guy. He's going to kill me for that. But methods of training, and I think he's in Germany or Austria. Phenomenal sports scientist, really good stuff. There's another guy in Pennsylvania that does a lot of this training methodology. He actually was Ronda Rousey's physical therapist when she really messed up her finger. I can't remember his name either. There's uh, uh, Gavin McMillan with Sports Science Lab. Great coach, very knowledgeable guy, very successful business. There's oh man, I forgot. I'm horrible. I'm really bad with names too. I'm friggin' terrible with names. There's SSL Finland. He's helped me out a ton too. I've had great phone calls with him. He's helped me like restructure my isometric strength training, giving his like opinions. Phenomenal facility in Finland. Everyone check him out. Trying to think who else. I know there's like SSL Korea. There's a nervous system training gym in like South Korea. There's another guy who trains. Oh man, I think it's called like neuroscience or neurofit. Trains out of his garage. Maybe everyone could look that guy up. And
I'll after this call, I'll kind of go through and
yeah,
find as much as I can and put them in a list in the description. Just
there's another guy in
to give
Hawaii
context.
who does it too. There's another guy in Hawaii who does the nervous system training. Can't remember his name. I spoke to him over the phone not so long ago. Like I said, horrible things. So there's like maybe like 10 that I can really think of that are doing the damn thing at a high level.
That's amazing to me. Just the number is that small. Just what's it just makes a lot of sense to me as a training system, and to only have that many people, that many organizations that are really putting content out about it. Um, and I've been wondering to myself, like, why is it why is that such a low number? And we kind of talked about it when we were setting this call, but it makes sense what you're saying, how Marv Murdovic was secretive with his techniques. Since I couldn't
think for a
find,
good reason. I think for
yeah,
in his circumstance, I'll kind of like this is my theory. I've never spoken to Gary. I've never met Gary or Marv. Unfortunately, Marv passed away in 2020. R.I.P. Marv.
Mhm.
I've never spoken to Gary. I'm trying to get a meeting with Gary just to kind of get his blessings and his approval on the training because he's one of the originators. You got to respect the guy. But I think Marv had a really unpopular case with his son Todd in the whole USC training, he trained him from he was a baby to an adult to become like this perfect quarterback, and not a lot of great things were said about it. Not a lot. It was, I wasn't there. I'm hearing things from documentaries, like there's a 30 for 30 that really dove into it. And Todd Marinovich, his son, was kind of like a guinea pig, with this like training methodology. And I think because Todd, he got into some trouble, he had substance abuse issues, and kind of like didn't really develop into a great quarterback. Great guy, but he had issues. He had his problems, and I think Marv got a lot of pushback from public opinion, and so he really kind of got out of the spotlight and just focused on himself and his training, and didn't really want to like dive deeper into like sharing things, because during the 80s and 90s, he wasn't very well respected because of the way things turned out with his son. So I think that circumstance created why he kind of kept to himself. Not to, perhaps, I don't know, I'm just kidding, perhaps not to keep everything a secret, but perhaps just because he just didn't want to deal with public opinion because it was already kind of turning out so poorly for him, So he probably like reclused a little bit to just focus on like his living, his lifestyle, his athletes, because he's a very dedicated man to his craft. And then, but maybe perhaps that secretive, that covetedness kind of carried over to like the other, I call them like the first generation of trainers, like Brian, Nick Curson, Gavin McMillan, where they were very secretive about that, about their training methodology because they didn't want any competitors, perhaps, I don't know. Or maybe they didn't want people to like muddy the waters or butcher the training. These are all, I've never had conversations with these guys about this, so I'm just guesstimating from my years of like trying to figure out why.
Yeah.
But how I look at it is that, I think the more people learn about this training, start incorporating their lives, start realizing how beneficial it is and how quickly it improves you as an athlete. I think that's just going to create more demand for the training, and the guys who are already established in the space, who already know how to do it and do it really well, they're going to be the ones that are sought after. That's how I view it.
Yeah, I'm right on board with you. And I mean, full disclosure, like I haven't started successful businesses, but I'm a bit of a nerd. I've read business books and stuff, and it's, from what I understand, it's like competition in general is going to help both sides.
Yeah,
I mean, we saw it
capitalism.
like way back with Microsoft and Apple. I think if we're going into the MMA world, Craig Jones is doing an interesting thing with his invitational tournament. I think ADCC's numbers this year will be higher than last year, even with direct competition on the same day. So that's just my prediction. But to me, it's, if you're putting out information, like, you have the head start. Anyone who's learning that information for the first time, like, they're having to figure out everything to put that information out there. And so you're growing the market with a head start. So as long as you keep, applying pressure forwards and progressing towards higher and higher quality information, like, you should be able to maintain that head start. And so there's that aversion to competition, but I think that might be an oversight in a lot of cases. But anyway, so
100%.
yeah. So shifting back to what you do a little bit, do you still have your gym space? Is that still where you train now that you're online only?
Yeah. I still have my gym space. I still utilize it, to train myself, film some content,
Yeah.
because like I'm so happy with that paint job, man. I just don't want to let it go. Like that
Yeah.
paint job was a pain in the ass. And
When did you know that?
I'm gonna be moving to Florida pretty soon.
Okay.
Yeah. to try to just to try to get it to make a change. And I got a buddy out there, William. You know, he's helped me a lot. He's helped me with like Facebook ad marketing and stuff like that. I'm going to be plugging into his gym, filming content, stuff like that. And I'm just burnt out on Michigan winters. You know, I just
Yeah.
want that. I want that Florida life.
Yeah. So is this move primarily a business move to Florida?
A little bit of both. Business. It's a business move, and you know, lifestyle change. You
Yeah.
know, yeah, I like the heat. You know, I
Yeah, a
like
little.
the sun. Uh, you know, I want to start branching out into YouTube, you know,
Mhm.
and start developing a good space in there, start creating more long form content, you know, in the YouTube space. And there's good networks, there's good people to learn from, you know, in the Florida area. You know, there's a lot of streamers, a lot of good internet entrepreneurs. So there's definitely a good network of people to learn and to help educate me on how to do it properly. And yeah, that's kind of the change I want to make.
And the reason I'm asking these questions and the next question here is just I'm trying to figure out as a trainer early in my career when to kind of make the next jump, the next step, change up my approach. But when did you know that it was time to switch from in person to online only? Was it a certain revenue discrepancy where you're like, I'm just making way more online, or was it more about the impact? And then when did it become clear to you that it was a good time to make this transition to Florida from Michigan?
Yeah, it was well, it was a combination of, you know, like the impact, you know, and the revenue, of course. Like you gotta like, you know, my online training business was like 3xing my brick and mortar, you know. So I'm like, okay, you know, like if I had these extra hours, you know, I could help more people give more. And the brick and mortar in the situation I was, like I'm in a small town in Howell, Michigan. It's not a lot of people. You know, it's been since I opened my facility in 2020, it's been very difficult to develop a good baseline and consistent clientele of athletes, you know, programs, and it was really difficult. And I just did not really enjoy that process. You know, like I didn't really enjoy having to go out to like, to be totally honest, it's hard to go out to baseball games and talk to coaches and, you know, like hand out business cards and make flyers and try to, you know, get kids in the door. It's a lot of work. And if I was like in a higher population town, like a major city, probably would have been a little easier. But you know, I wanted to grow faster. I wanted more. I wanted to make bigger impact. I wanted a larger business. I wanted to really push this training out there into the world. I've always That's why I have like binders and books, you know, like of me like scrapbooking the history and methodology of this training system. I have like a big picture dream or vision for this. And I knew my online platform was really starting to take off. And I'm like, holy shit, it might actually be possible. I actually could pull this off. You know, if it was able to grow, you know, this quickly in 5 months, you know, working on it part time. Well, I'd say not technically full time. I was doing like two full time jobs. But if I was to really double down on this, like how quickly can I grow this, you know, and really like fulfill that vision, you know, like because everyone knows knees over toes guy. Like everyone has that
Yeah.
name in their brain, right? Because he just started giving away all his stuff for free, and now he's like, you know, he's huge. He's like one of the biggest impactors in like training ever. You know, he's you could say he's like one of the goats. You know,
Yeah,
arguably.
100%. He's
Yeah,
been a
and
huge inspiration for me personally.
yeah, like you know, everyone's done ATG. So I was like, okay, like, you know, I want to make an impact like that. Like I know that I have a really good product. I know the training system will really help a lot of people, change a lot of lives fairly easily. You know, I just got to get it out there. And the best way to get it out there is to educate the population how this works, why this works, how it's applicable, you know, show them. And basically all my content, every video I see, uh, I basically mimic how my brain works. Like, you know, because now I'm at the point where I like invent new movements. Now that
Yeah.
I'm so well versed in the principles, I can just start creating new training methodologies. But to me, it's like I want to show them like the who, what, when, where, and why. Like, you know, how you should do this, what it works in the body, why it works in the sport. This is how often you should do it, you know, and so because I want everyone to learn something and get a lot of value with every post. And I use the and because a lot of people don't like the AI voice. I'm going to kind of disclose this right now. I utilize the AI voice because it's faster. It's faster than me trying to record my voice, and I screw up. Like, it's not easy, like doing voiceovers and getting your words right. And I realize I can make a new video every day if I utilize some tools to speed up the process, because I still have other things I have to handle throughout my day. So that's why I use the AI voice. But I've been trying to do more for everyone. I started the vlog series, trying to become like an elite level athlete in 90 days, which has been a ton of fun. It's been a great. Uh, sometimes I'm like, why did I do this? But I also want people to know who I am, because that's one thing I realized. Like, not a lot of people know me. People just know my Instagram. They know this AI voice and they know the training, but they don't actually like know me at all. So I want to kind of create more content so people can kind of get, a lot of value when they come to my Instagram page. They'll learn something. They'll kind of like understand like my journey, my reason why, like what I go through, the trials and tribulations I go through. So that's all. That's what I'm about. Hoping they get a ton of value. So every time they come to my page, it helps make their life better.
Um, One thing I'm kind of curious about as you're talking is like, are most of the people that are understanding your content now or viewing it, are they athletes or trainers, or is it a little bit of both? It's since you're talking about knees over toes guy, he's got the knees over toes brand, which kind of is for athletes, and then he's got the ATG brand, the Athletic Truth Group, that's his kind of development pipeline for trainers. So in my mind, I separate those as there's the information for trainers and information for athletes. Do you separate them, and are you more geared towards one of those two directions at this point?
Yeah. I do have a separate. Like this was never like initially planned. It kind of just showed up from demand. Where more and more trainers were showing up on calls. Looking to learn this. And I initially just wanted to work with like martial artists. I didn't want to teach people anyone this, but I've had a lot of guys who are like, "Hey, man, I just really want." And I was in that same situation too. So like, what am I going to do? Say no to the guy? Like I'm going to help him. So I've kind of been trying to put together a mastermind group on how to teach other trainers the system, the philosophy, answer their questions, uh, their Instagram platforms, whatever it is I can help them with. I try to help them learning the athletic assessment process, learning the training process, running them through the training simultaneously, because I think the best teacher you have is your own feedback from your own central nervous system. If you know how it feels, you understand how it works, I think you get a lot more value out of that than a textbook, me personally.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I got a mastermind group, got a couple trainers in there. I think we have like 15 guys in there, where I help them, with the nervous system training. And then I have like my main clientele group, where it's primarily martial artists. We got like some dancers, a figure skater, different athletes that want the help. No problem helping them. But I really wanted to focus. My main niche is older martial artists, guys above the age of like 40, because those guys need the most help, and the nervous system training helps them the fastest, So, and that's like an area where I kind of noticed in jiu-jitsu class, being a martial artist myself, it gets hard. There's a lot of older guys, in jiu-jitsu class that kind of struggle. They, they run into roadblocks. They don't always get a lot of help. Everyone wants to be like the young, sexy trainer and train like the pro athletes in their 20s and stuff like that. Which is great. But to me, I'd rather I want to work with the older guys. Help them. Getting older myself. I guess that's just kind of like where I don't know. I saw that there was kind of a gap in the market, with helping older martial artists, and I was like, I could fill that gap. I've always liked training older guys too. I've always liked working with guys that are in their 50s, in their 60s, learning their history, helping them with their problems, seeing them get better. And yeah, that niche has been working. It's been very successful.
There's this idea I've run into in my jiu-jitsu journey, which is not that extensive, but I'm a pretty athletic guy relative to my skill in jiu-jitsu. So when I first started, I was just trying to overpower people, be faster, be stronger, be quicker, and that worked. But at some point, I realized like I really had to focus on the technique and let the 120 pound jiu-jitsu player beat me if they have better techniques rather than just muscling out of bad positions and stuff like that. And the way this ties into what you're saying is I also kind of prescribe to the idea that like I'm 27, so I'm still in my 20s, but I've gotten a lot of value out of reading information that's geared for older people, whether it's financial information, fitness information, lifestyle information, and it's kind of the same thing. It's like in your 20s you can stay up all night and you know wake up the next morning, go to work and get through it, but and I'm a realist in the sense that I know that that's not a forever thing, and so I think it's important to understand like what types of lifestyles are successful people in their 50s and 60s using, and how can I apply those lifestyles to now. And it's the same kind of thing as like learning jujitsu through technique rather than using the advantages of my physical predispositions. So that was one
Mhm.
thing that definitely drew me to your account when I saw it. Is I think in your bio it says something like specialize in training with older athletes or something like that. And even though I'm not
Yeah.
an older athlete, that definitely resonated with me. Um, where
Well,
can
because
people?
they've seen a lot. They've been
Yeah,
through a lot.
yeah, exactly.
And it's hard to be wise when you're strong
Yeah,
and you feel invincible.
yeah.
It's that famous quote, like every man has two lives, and the second one starts when he realizes he only has one.
That's a good one.
And it's no fault to younger guys. We're like that by design.
Hmm.
We're like when you're in your 20s, like between 18 and 25, like as a man, you're like suicidal by nature. Like that's why it's so easy to get them to grab a rifle and go to war. It's so easy.
Hmm.
Like they're really good at it. They can take a lot of abuse and they can follow orders and they really feel like they can make a difference because that's evolutionary speaking. That's what young men did. Young men created gangs and coalitions. And they their main priority was to try to take over, conquer, and pass off their genetics before they get killed. Because for most of the human race, most men didn't live past the age of 25. So it's like that by design. But now that as you kind of get past 25 and you start to become a little bit wiser, you start realizing, that there's more to you than just how strong you are, but how smart you are, how wise you are, how all these different ways to develop value. you know and when you get older, you can't rely on your physicality. Like right now, like I'm feeling, going through this process, this vlog series, I'm noticing that my body is kind of failing me a little bit. Part of it is because I'm deconditioned. I haven't been training the way I should be training, 100%. But another part of me is just like, geez, man, I remember taking time off and then just jumping right back into it like nothing changed. Now I feel like it really drops off. So now I gotta use my mind more where my body's slower.
Hmm.
So I always say that younger guys, listen to these older guys. Just listen. Don't try to argue. Don't try to add your own opinion. Just listen to what they have to say, because you can save yourself a lot of time and trouble and make a lot more money in your life if you just listen to the guys who've been through it, because they're alive for a reason. If they were dumb, they would have died. So
Yeah.
sorry to little. I want to
No,
throw that
it's
out there.
I agree with that 100%. I think everything that older guys, all the everything older guys can learn and gain from, younger guys can as well. Whereas everything that younger guys can learn and gain from doesn't necessarily transfer to the older age group. And
Yeah, it's not
so,
supposed to.
yeah, exactly. So it's, um, anyways, with a couple more questions. I know I don't want to use up too much of your time. I know you're a busy man, but where can someone like me, a trainer interested in learning the um, athletic portion as well, where can I learn your mastermind information? Where can I um, learn your athletic training? Where do I find you online?
Yeah, so you go on my Instagram. I only got one social media platform that I've really built out. Like I'm working on my TikTok, but search me up on Instagram, Quintin.Torres36 on IG, Quintin. Feel free to just message me. Like I'm chatting with people on direct message all the time. Like we have up to like 60 conversations a day.
Wow.
If you need help, you want to learn more, just reach out. Our doors are open. We're open to help you. We're open to teach you things. you know. A lot of people that we get on calls with that want to learn stuff will give you part of the methodology to work on for free. You're like, no problem, just work on it, see how you like it. You know, it's there's very little barriers of entry. You know,
Mm-hmm.
if you want to get a hold of the training, try to make it very, very effortless. You know, we just got to know some things about you. We got to know some goals. We got to make sure that it's safe for you to start the training, like we did. Like, you know, we got to make sure like your spine isn't like severely damaged, or you have an ACL. Like if you got something detrimental to your body, you got to go see a doctor. You got to go get like an MRI. You got to get more help. Like I can't do anything from behind. You know, I don't have enough tools. I don't have a medical staff to help you.
Mm-hmm.
But if everything checks out, things are safe for you, you want to try out the training system, you want to learn more about it, you just want to ask me questions, just reach out. Just send me a DM. We're always talking to people. We're always trying to help as many people as possible.
Awesome. And I can attest from my end, that's how I got in touch with you. So yeah, you do a great job of staying on top of that. The last thing I wanted to ask you, I was kind of hoping for a point in the conversation to bring this up, but
Yeah.
I thought it might be good for clips, honestly. But explain to me your idea of the athletic red pill. That's something you've said that, and I think it's just a cool idea, and it sums up a lot of the way you approach training with the cool catchphrase of the athletic red pill. But what does that mean to you?
So like the red pill in the human zeitgeist comes from the Matrix,
Mm-hmm.
and it means the truth, right? So I call it the athletic red pill because there's this thing that happens to people when they start doing the nervous system training. It's like you open a Pandora's box. Like once you see it, you can't unsee it. You know, and this happens over and over and over again, where people, ask themselves like, "What have I been doing with my body? Like, why am I swinging these kettlebells around and jumping around with these TRX things and going like this with the battle row?" Like, not saying that those are like bad. Like, I know there's guys who make a living off kettlebells, and I think that's great. I used to love kettlebells, and I'll still fuck around with a kettlebell here and there, but there is a difference in the results you get and the way you move and the way you feel when you start utilizing the nervous system training in comparison to other training philosophies. And I've done a lot of different programs. I've done a lot of different philosophies, man. I've done just about everything you can think of. I have like 3 new things I have to check out called body tempering and MPE. Those are something new that I never heard of that I'm going to look into. But as far as like movements, man, I've done a lot. And I used to be all about the kettlebells and the battle ropes and the, hitting the tire with the hammer. I used to hit the fuck out of that tire. I was all about it, man. I loved it. Calisthenics. I used to do parkour, like CrossFit, Olympic lifts. Man, I've done a lot. But once you start doing this nervous system training and you realize, like, holy shit, I can get really good really fast at whatever sport I'm doing. And it's encouraging. Instead of something taking like 4 to 5 weeks to start feeling a difference, like you start feeling a difference in like 2 to 3 days. And then you're like, holy shit, like I can get good. And then you go back to the gym and you're even better. And now your jujitsu's better with less reps. Like, it's like, what? It's like, I was like, this used to happen to me. Like I used to suck at arm bars. It used to piss me off. I can never get my leg to swing over. It's like lock in that arm bar. It was always difficult for me. And I did the athletic assessment. I realized I had a huge weakness in my hip flexor. So I started training it differently, started incorporating the nervous system training methodology to fix my hip flexor, to fix my core strength, the way my core moves in dynamic proprioceptive ways. I took a break from jiu-jitsu for like 2 months, just did nervous system training like crazy. I came back, dude, I was killing everyone in jiu-jitsu. Everything was coming easy. Like I could see moves. And now, because I knew how my body worked, I knew how things felt to manipulate different limbs. Like I'm like, oh, okay, I get what I'm doing. Okay, I just got to internally rotate my leg. Boom, boom, boom. Okay, makes sense. Like I was one of the cool kids in jiu-jitsu class. I was one of the talented guys. And there's always that motherfucker in jiu-jitsu that just figures it out faster than everyone. When the coach is like, dude, okay, ready, go. And there's like 98% of everyone is like, what the fuck did we just see? Like, how do we do this? And you're with your partner and you're just like, trying not to look like an asshole in front of the jiu-jitsu instructor. But there's always that one guy that's just like, oh, okay, okay, got it. Just like someone trying, no problem. Like go plateaus, yeah, easy. Just has better joint manipulation, better flexibility. Like BJ Penn, just can control his body better. It's all the nervous system. And we have a word for this. We have a word for these kind of people. It's called talented. But it's not talent. It's the control and strength of your nervous system is what makes you talented. And there's a way you can hyper focus on these key areas of your body to enhance that within days, not weeks, but days. And so when you start to do these things, when you start taking your shoes off, hyper strengthening your feet, start doing these weird ball work movements, start getting into isometric strength training, plyometric strength training, start learning how to strengthen weak areas of your body so your overall body is moving stronger and more efficiently as a unit instead of getting fragmented by different training methodologies that like isolate certain like training movements, which like tightens fascia, reduces elastic quality in the muscle. When you start incorporating these weird training methodologies, as odd as they may look, you start realizing like, holy shit, like I've been doing this like backwards for years, not getting better for years. And most of us get desperate. Most of us just start doing more kettlebell swings, more battle ropes, more maces, more bench press, more squat, more jiu-jitsu classes. And what happens, we end up getting injured. That's what I'm noticing. A lot of guys just get injured because they're just pushing it because they're not getting what they want out of they're not progressing, and they got a tournament coming up, and they're trying to get better. They're trying to get better. It's just not coming through the way they want. But little do they know that it's the way they're training their body, which is digressing them. So we alter the way you train your body. Just have an open mind. Give it a chance. That's why I give it away for free. Give it a chance. Give it 72 hours. Really give it a college try. And you start feeling the difference. And then the paradigm shifts. Like we're just like, holy shit. Like there is secret sauce out there. It is real. There is like this is like the athletic red pill. And then the rabbit hole starts from there. And then you realize like, why? Why is this training not everywhere? How come the universities aren't incorporating it? How come, do you know how many college professors that I've came to with this? And they all told me like, I don't think so, man. You know how many times I've been, dude, you know how many voicemails I've left? No one says shit. And everyone looks at it. I remember this one sports performance scientist, I kept showing him video after video. He's like, just looks like some basic foot training. And I'm like, like, all right. Like, so it can be frustrating. It can be frustrating that a lot of people, and I get a lot of haters, which is fine. If anyone's by the way, I will put this out there. If there's any sports performance coach or any trainer that thinks this is total bullshit, total snake oil, I invite you to an open debate. We'll have Jake Shields. He'll moderate. No problem. He'll moderate the debate. And we'll take your ideas. We'll put it to the test. We'll record and let the people decide. Anyway, throw that out of the way. But yeah, man. Once you start feeling it, you start realizing it. You start realizing how good you can get and how quickly you can get it. And you don't want to go back. Almost no one goes back. No one goes back to traditional training methods. So that's like the athletic red pill. It kind of wakes you up out of the matrix, and you can really see things for how they can be or how they are.
Yeah, I like that. I think that's a really powerful way to kind of put someone in the shoes of someone who's using this nervous system training. And yeah, to me that just clicks. But yeah, this has been a long call. I don't want to take more of your time than I already have.
That's all right. We'll do a part 2.
Yeah,
there's still so much more to talk about.
I know. I could ask questions all day. And yeah,
by the way,
especially.
Did we get you any training methodology yet?
No, but I would love to take you up on that.
Yeah, man. Give me. Yeah, I'll send you. I'll email you. I'll email you some ball work training. I want you to work on it.
Yeah, I will get on it.
Man, no problem.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Quintin. I appreciate your time here, and I'm trying to create value, and I appreciate you helping me do that here on this channel.
Yeah, 100%, man. Thanks for inviting me. These are always fun. Always fun to kind of talk about this, spread the word, try to share the information, share my story. So I appreciate you reaching out. I'm glad we made this possible.
Yeah, me too.